The PRovoke podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.
Hello and welcome to the Echo Chamber. I am Diana Marszalek. I am the senior reporter with PRovoke Media. I have with me a repeat guest, Jamie McLaughlin. Jamie's been in PR executive recruiting for 15 years. He sits on the Institute of the Public Relations Board, and so he's in prime position to discuss our topic today, the impact of the coronavirus shutdown on employment. Welcome.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Yeah.
So the first obvious question that is on everybody's mind is what impact the shutdown is going to have, the shutdown that we're currently experiencing is going to have on the comms business, particularly in terms of employment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a pressing thing. We're seeing lots of headlines in the news about pending job cuts, and massive uncertainty in the market. But that's generally speaking. Of course, communications doesn't always abide by the same rules as the general market. And if I start from a positive point of view, and I always like to, if I can, is we're definitely seeing uncertainty in the market, unease. But the flip side of that is that communications is in terms of this crisis, this pandemic, is truly at the coalface, and never before, I would argue, have we seen a greater need for communication services. Communicators are in high demand. Sure, it's exhilarating, exhausting, and probably at times a little scary, but it's definitely the role of the communicator has never been more important, in my opinion. So we're definitely seeing a demand for services, particularly if businesses are aligned to, or people are aligned to the corporate communications function, of course. So on that side of it, it's definitely it's extremely interesting whether they're getting whether people are getting paid more or agencies are getting paid more is another question. But we're definitely seeing the demand for communicators at an all-time high.
So demand for communicators at an all-time high, but communicators, from what I'm hearing, in certain segments. So you've got the travel industry, you have, the boutique agencies. I was talking to someone who said they know somebody in the restaurant, specialty business, and business has just dried up. So my understanding is that there has been some immediate impact, that the larger firms with these other capabilities that are in demand are somewhat buffered at the moment, but there have been layoffs.
Absolutely, yeah. There has certainly been layoffs. There have been there has been scale backs. There has been delaying of hiring, but particularly with businesses that are more aligned to the consumer world. And as you said, Diana, businesses such as who are in restaurants or hotels. Absolutely, there's a definite impact there, and not surprisingly. So it's we've definitely seen that in the market. Absolutely.
So through your work with the Institute of Public Relations, you're talking to people all the time. What are you hearing is on people's mind, whether they're agency leaders or employees? In terms of hiring, the impact on business, staffing, all that stuff. I know it's still new into this, but are people in a panic?
Well, it seems to be people have, we're figuring it out as we're going along, aren't we? We've never been in this situation, and so it's very difficult to make any sort of clear and concise predictions about what's going on. What we've seen from the majority of businesses is that they've hit pause, and that's probably for me, I think that's probably the most correct thing to do. A lot of businesses aren't saying that they're not hiring again this year, or they've even necessarily stopped hiring, but there's certainly businesses aren't bullish about hiring and aren't rushing into things. So we've been seeing maybe people or businesses implying, yes, we're going to hire this person, but we will wait until well, it was April, and we're basically in April now. We're seeing things getting pushed back to sort of May or even June. So there's definitely there is definitely businesses are approaching this sensibly, but nobody's been bullish in terms of hiring. So I think there's been a lot of pause. How whether that will continue, or it will actually businesses will start to say that we're not hiring, and actually we're making cuts. Time will tell, and it's really based on how long this goes along. Really, as I said, we're figuring it out. We're figuring it out on the fly.
Which is the hard part. Nobody knows. There's no end in sight. Eventually, something has to happen. I imagine. I mean, that I imagine is the biggest challenge. So you can't even really measure the scope yet of what agencies are going to feel, because it can be a month, it can be 6 months. I don't know. No one knows.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, the longer it goes on, the more likely it is that cuts will be made, and we'll see a reduction in PR agencies and in-house communications departments. So at the moment, if again trying to stay sort of optimistic on these things, will I think pushing pause on recruitment makes perfect sense. But it seems that businesses are still able to are still pipelining, as we would call it, in terms of talking to good candidates and again, if and when things pick up, then they can move very quickly. But we're not seeing a ton of recruitment. That said, there's definitely hiring still going on. If businesses have a very pressing need, then of course they're adding to the team. And again, back to corporate communications departments or agencies that are aligned with corporate communications, CEO advisory, they've never been busier. Whether that equates to more hiring, I'm not sure. And again, time will tell. But definitely, certain businesses, certain departments are in high demand.
So how does the process work? Nobody's allowed to be near each other. Nobody goes to an office. How is hiring accomplished? How does someone start a job in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. PR is such a people-focused business. It's not often about what's on someone's resume. It's about those sort of. I never like to use the term because I disagree with it, but the softer skills. Again, back to the your CEO advisory. You are crisis communicators. Your corporate communicators. So it's as much about how much does your client trust you and get on with you and believe in what you're doing. So it's often it's not based on when a employer looks at a resume. It's once they get them in and spends time with them and whether it's a formal interview or going out for dinner or these sort of things. So it's proving and it will prove to be a real issue, I think, for businesses making hires, particularly very senior hires, where it's where culture and fit are so important. So businesses are of course pressing ahead, and Zoom is everyone's friend at the moment, and other such tools. But it's a bit of a quandary at the moment. Again, because it's so new, time will tell. But are businesses going to make a CCO hire if they've never met the person in physically? So I don't know. Well, again, time will tell. But it's a real quandary at the moment. Will this happen? Can this happen? My instinctive is if there's a good enough need for it, a great enough need for it, then it will. But it kind of goes against most hiring practices in our world, which is, again, it's often based on when people have sat down and met and spoken. And then on top of that, it's how do you onboarding, which is so critical in hiring. How do you onboard a staff member, make them feel that they're part of the team, make them feel that that they can ask questions, put their hand up, and then, how do you do that when they're, again, physically not sat next to you or sat across the office from you? And then again, how do you get them set up with the sort of the more practical things, laptop and intranet and all that sort of thing. So, but again, we're seeing businesses rolling with the punches. I've used that phrase a lot in the last sort of few weeks. We're certainly seeing businesses doing that, and again, back to using tools such as Zoom. That those things have been critical. Businesses are couriering laptops and to new joiners. I was speaking to actually a friend who had a chair sent to them the other day because they didn't have the right sort of the right setup at their home. So I think businesses are definitely again, we're doing this all on the fly, but again, time will tell how many significant hires are going to be made when there's not that physical meeting available.
Yeah, and I was thinking as you were talking, I mean, no matter what level you're at, going into a new environment, a new job, those first weeks are hard. I mean, and then we're in an environment where you have to talk about not just diversity, we're talking about inclusion, and inclusion could be just feeling comfortable, right? So, like how to ask those questions, and there's no IT person, and there's no one to go to. It could either be a blessing or a curse to be working at a distance. I guess, virtual agencies probably have a little bit of a leg up, at least in this arena at this point. Yeah,
absolutely. Regularly talking to people who this is quite normal for them, and businesses agencies that are virtual have maybe they've had a head start on that as well. But I think again, PR people tend to be entrepreneurial and industrious, and think on their feet. So I think a lot of particularly PR agencies who've got so much hustle might have been a week or two with teething problems, but I'm sure they're up and running, and if you have a quick look on people's LinkedIn and Twitter feeds and stuff like that, you're seeing the many screenshots of all the conversations that are going on, and over Zoom, and people are trying to be trying to make things fun. You're seeing sort of happy hour happening, and like dress up Fridays where people are coming to the Zoom call in full tuxedo and the like. So it's
or just getting out of your pajamas.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Yeah, what they've got on below the waist is probably different to the above the waist. But yeah, so we're definitely seeing businesses like that. But you're right. Look, I was listening to a prominent CEO talking about that as well, and it's they're starting every conversation with not what are you doing, but how are you doing, because that's just as an important question, because it's you can just feel that you've got to jump in and immediately start talking about what's on the agenda today and what are you doing for the rest of the week, but it's actually how are you doing, because there's a lot of people who are on their own and maybe aren't having that interaction, that physical interaction with humans that we've become so used to.
Well, and absolutely, and the industry was just, I won't say just starting to approach, but really embracing the idea of promoting mental health before this happened. And if there's anything to spur anxiety and loneliness and fear, it would be a pandemic, right? Being alone. So that is, I imagine, agencies having to step up in terms of their employees and making sure, you cited an example, but that I imagine is moving up to the top of some of their agendas in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have heard from agency owners that they're getting calls. People are scared they're going to lose their job. So there's sort of a spate of job seekers calling people that otherwise would be maybe happy to stay put and where they're at. And there's a little opportunity in that. Any thoughts on that? Have you heard anything along those lines?
What you mean, sort of?
They're getting the cold calls, so they're getting talent and opportunity to hire talent that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise.
No, absolutely. There definitely will be that, because I think it's the argument is that everyone is, at this time everyone has to be considering their options, because we don't know what the future, what lies in the future. So I think it's definitely there is there is that sort of, you've always got to have your ear to the ground and thinking what's next. The flip side of that is, am I lucky to just have a job? I should be grateful, sort of thing. What we saw Richard Edelman announce that there'll be no layoffs as a result of the crisis, and I think that's a great move by a CEO to quell those sort of fears and issues. They're not going to go away, of course, but if your leader, the owner of the business is telling you that we're not going to make layoffs as a result of the crisis, then that must reassure you to an extent. So I think I think that's a great move by Edelman, and I think that's good for hopefully Edelman being at the top of the tree. Hopefully that trickles down a little bit as well in terms of allaying any fears.
It will. So what is the drastic change you're seeing in the job market from what it was, say, 2 months ago, when talent, when agencies were saying they couldn't find good talent, or everybody had a job, to maybe even 6 months down the road? I mean, are you picturing the dynamics really changing? I know we're in flux at this point, but is this going to flip the job market?
Yeah, I think there will be some implications. Absolutely, particularly that you have almost could arguably there might be a bottleneck of talent, because people that may have moved in March and April haven't moved, and then people that maybe moved in June and July haven't moved. So there might be a flooding of candidates, but then of course there might be a flooding of roles as well, because if businesses just press pause, came out of the situation reasonably well, then they still need to make these hires. So there could be, traditionally, August, September is July, August, September can be very, very slow. Then late September, October, very, very busy. So we may see, again, if we come out of this in Q3, for example, we may see one of the most frenetic times in the recruitment market, when traditionally it's very, very slow. So it could be, as we say in London, a bit of a bun fight where everyone's fighting over talent and everyone's fighting over roles. But again, I hope to see that, because that means the market's good and we're making a recovery. So I wouldn't mind seeing that. Absolutely.
No, absolutely, because those who, unfortunately, if there are cuts and job losses and all, you want them to get back to work, and hopefully in the industry, right? I mean, we don't want to see the industry diminish as a result.
That's my worry. And if you're talking about how the market might change, is do people leave the industry? And of course that happens, and it will happen. But again, we're all in this together. There's no industries that haven't been affected by this. Yes, you might, with great intentions, want to join another industry, but there's only a finite amount of businesses that are doing well out of this, and I'm sure they've got the pick of talent already. So there could be that people leaving the industry, but where are they going? Well, where can they go?
Right. Do you see any real long-term lasting changes as a result of this, either in job descriptions, what people are hired to do, maybe the working conditions that people want? Maybe people want to be virtual. I hear open office plans are probably not going to be, people aren't going to want those anymore with germ infestations. What do you see?
Well, I think, I definitely think there will be, there will be some lasting changes. I mean, I think it's going to be quite difficult for the more traditional businesses to say that you can't work remotely if it becomes the new norm. But again, communications is, PR is about, again, back to the sort of skills that are needed. The inclusiveness and working together and creativity, I think is best served when you're sat in front of each other, of course. So, but I think I definitely think there'll be more flexibility in working, and I'm a big advocate for that, because I think that keeps people in the industry, giving them that flexibility. I think, Diane, I think you mentioned that there was a movement towards that in PR as well recently. So from a negative point of view, if other industries that more traditional catch up, PR might be less appealing if flexibility becomes the new norm. So that might be another way things are flipped on the head. In terms of job descriptions and needs, again, I definitely think there's the reputation management, crisis management, corporate positioning, those kind of areas are going to become more prominent. And I was reading Paul's article a few days ago. The benefits of an optimistic piece on what could come out, and I do agree with a lot of what he said. So, but generally speaking, I believe that communications will be strengthened as a result of that. And I think that's a positive that will come of this.
Okay, well, that's a good note to end, except to say that we will check in whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5 months, and hopefully that's what we will be experiencing at that time. So we'll look forward to hearing about that from you.
And everything I said will be completely wrong, but we're said in good faith anyway.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I appreciate the conversation. Good luck out there.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be in touch. Take care.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the PRovoke podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.